I explored the cursed Blackwood Manor. I shouldn't have come back alive. By silent screams. Don't forget to like and subscribe. What's up, my Urban Unearthed crew? It's your boy Jake coming at you with what might be our most epic exploration yet. For weeks, you guys have been blowing up my comments, DMs, all of it, telling me I had to check out this place. And after a 6-hour drive and some creative navigation, we are finally here. Behold, Blackwood Manor. The locals I spoke to back in town wouldn't even say the name out loud. They just called it the house on the hill. They say it's been empty for the better part of a century, and for good reason. The stories are why we're here, right? I adjusted the head-mounted camera, its red recording light, a small, defiant beacon in the encroaching gloom. The air here was heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, decay, and something else. Something metallic and vaguely unsettling, like old blood. The legend of Blackwood Manor centered on its builder, Alistair Blackwood. He was a 19th century industrialist, a man who had clawed his way to immense wealth through ruthless means. They said that as he grew older, he became a recluse, paranoid, and obsessed with the occult. The rumors claimed he built this mansion, not just as a home, but as a temple for unspeakable rituals, a place to bargain with forces man was never meant to contact. The stories ended as they often do in tragedy. Alistair, his wife, and their 2 young children all vanished from the face of the earth one winter night in 1898. The house had been silent ever since. All right, enough talk. Let's see if we can find a way in. Front door's a no-go, obviously. I circled the building, my boots sinking into the overgrown lawn. A massive oak tree, ancient and gnarled, had partially collapsed against the west wing, its branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the stone. One of those fingers had smashed through a large window on the ground floor. It was my invitation. Bingo, I whispered, more to myself than to my future audience. Looks like Mother Nature is a fan of the channel. Getting through the window was tricky. Jagged shards of glass lined the frame, eager to bite. I carefully cleared a path, my heart starting to thrum with that familiar mix of adrenaline and anticipation. This was the moment I lived for, the threshold between the known world and the one that time forgot. I dropped inside, landing with a soft thud on a carpet of dust and debris. The air within the manor was even colder than outside and unnaturally still. I flicked on my high-powered flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp cone through the darkness. I was in what must have once been a grand library. Towering empty bookshelves lined the walls like silent sentinels. A thick layer of dust covered everything, preserving the room in a state of grayscale decay. The only splash of color was a dark, ugly stain on the floorboards near a collapsed fireplace, a stain I did my best to ignore. Whoa, I breathed, panning my camera around the room. You can just feel the history in here. It's heavy. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the immense silence. I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps echoing unnervingly. The layout was a labyrinth of hallways and cavernous rooms, a grand ballroom with a shattered chandelier, a dining hall with a long ghost of a table still set with dusty, tarnished silverware. In the kitchen, a rusted pot still sat on the stove, as if the cook had just stepped out for a moment, 100 years ago. It was in the children's nursery on the 2nd floor that the feeling in the house began to shift from melancholic to malevolent. The room was small, with peeling wallpaper depicting faded circus animals. A single, small rocking horse stood in the center of the room. As I filmed it, a cold spot washed over me, so intense it felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Goosebumps erupted on my arms. Okay, definite temperature drop right there, I said, my voice a little shakier than I would have liked. EMF meter is going, well, it's going nuts. I held up the device, and its needle was screaming, red lights flashing erratically. I took a step back, and the needle calmed. I stepped forward and it shrieked again. The cold was centered on the rocking horse. As I watched, filming, the horse began to move. It wasn't a sudden push. It was a slow, deliberate rock. Back and forth. Back and forth. The creak of its ancient wood, the only sound in the entire world. It was impossible. There was no draft, no vibration from my movements. It was moving on its own. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just old house creaks or my imagination. This was real. This was happening. Did you guys see that? I whispered into my camera's mic, my throat tight. It's rocking. I backed out of the room slowly, never taking my eyes off the horse as it continued its silent, ghostly rhythm. My bravado had evaporated, replaced by a primal fear that was cold and sharp in my gut. I should have left then. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get back through that broken window and never look back. But the explorer in me, the part that fueled my channel, was stronger. I had to know more. I had to know what happened here. My search became more frantic, more focused, and then I found it. Tucked away behind a false panel in the library, the room I had first entered, was a small, hidden study. And on the desk, caked in dust but otherwise untouched, was a leather-bound journal. Alistair Blackwood's journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages were filled with a spidery, increasingly unhinged script. I sat on a dusty chair, aimed my camera at the book, and began to read aloud. October 12th, 1897. The construction is complete. The lower sanctum is perfectly aligned with the solstice ley lines. The texts speak of a gateway, a means of summoning a being of immense power, one who is not bound by the trivialities of time and mortality. They call it the shadow in the doorway. My contemporaries build empires of steel and steam. I shall build one of eternity. The early entries were arrogant, full of occult theory and diagrams I didn't understand. But as the pages turned, the tone grew darker, more desperate. November 5th, 1897. Eleanor fears my work. She does not understand. She speaks of leaving, of taking the children. She cannot see the glory that awaits us. They are a distraction I can no longer afford. The whispers have started. It hears my call. It promises me knowledge, power, life beyond measure. The price, it says, is small. A floorboard creaked in the hallway just outside the study. I snapped my head up, my flashlight beam cutting through the doorway. Nothing. Just an empty, dark hall. But I wasn't alone. I knew it, with a certainty that was as absolute as my own heartbeat. I forced myself to keep reading. December 21st, 1897. The solstice is upon us. I performed the preliminary ritual tonight. The air in the sanctum grows thick, like water. I saw it, not with my eyes, but with my mind, a formless, ancient thing of profound darkness. It showed me glimpses of dying stars and worlds not yet born. It demands a sacrifice, a key to open the door fully, an anchor of blood and innocence to bind it to this plane. My breath hitched. An anchor of blood and innocence. Eleanor. The children. The final entry was dated the night they disappeared. The handwriting was a barely legible scrawl, the ink smudged and blotted. It is here. It is inside the house. I opened the door and it came through. It is so much more than I imagined. Its voice is the grinding of stones and the silence between heartbeats. But the bargain was a lie. It does not serve. It consumes. Eleanor, the children. Their screams are the only sounds in the house now. Oh God, what have I done? It wears my face now. It is in the halls. It is in the mirrors. It is... The entry ended there, a long, dark smear of ink dragging down the page. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed from the floor above me. It sounded like 1,000 plates shattering at once. I leaped to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then came another sound, a soft, dragging noise coming from the main hallway. Getting closer. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Fear, cold and absolute, seized me. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't a memory. This was the thing Alistair had summoned, the shadow in the doorway, and it was still here. My flashlight beam shook as I pointed it towards the study's entrance. The scraping stopped right outside the door. An oppressive, profound silence fell over the house. I held my breath, listening. For a full minute, there was nothing. Then a low, guttural whisper slithered out of the darkness. It was a sound that didn't seem to have a source, a sound that resonated directly inside my skull. Get out. But it wasn't a warning. It was a dare. The journal had mentioned a lower sanctum, a ritual chamber. Fueled by a desperate, insane curiosity, I knew I had to find it. Maybe there was a clue, a way to understand what I was facing. Following the diagrams in the journal, I found my way back to the collapsed fireplace in the library. Behind the mantel, hidden by a loose stone, was a rusted iron ring. It took all my strength, but I managed to pull it. With a deep groan of grinding stone, a section of the floor slid away, revealing a steep, narrow staircase descending into absolute blackness. The air that rose from it was foul, ancient, and bone-chillingly cold. This was it, the heart of the house. I descended, each step echoing into the oppressive void below. The flashlight beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness just a few feet ahead. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a circular, cavernous chamber. The walls were made of a strange black stone that seemed to drink the light, and they were covered in a complex lacework of carvings and symbols that made my head spin just looking at them. In the center of the room was a stone altar, stained with that same dark, ugly color I'd seen on the library floor. And all around the altar, inscribed on the floor in a circle, were the same words repeated over and over again, in a language I didn't recognize, but whose meaning I felt in my very soul. They were words of binding, of summoning, of unending hunger. My camera was still rolling, documenting it all, but I was no longer a YouTuber. I was a witness to something terrible and ancient. That's when I heard the whispering again. It wasn't just in my head anymore. It was all around me, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the very air. Dozens of voices, all speaking at once, weaving a tapestry of madness and pain. I could hear the faint, terrified cries of children, a woman's desperate sobbing, and underneath it all, Alistair Blackwood's voice, not as a man, but as a tormented echo, screaming, a single word over and over, liar, liar, liar. And then, the light from my flashlight began to flicker. It pulsed, weakening with every beat of my frantic heart. In the strobing darkness, I started to see it, a shape coalescing in the shadows behind the altar. It was tall and impossibly thin, a distortion in the air, a piece of the night that had peeled itself away from the rest. It had no discernible features, no face, no eyes, but I felt its gaze on me, a weight of pure malevolence that threatened to crush the very air from my lungs. It was Alistair's shadow. My flashlight died. I was plunged into total, suffocating darkness. The whispering stopped. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my backup light, my fingers slick with sweat. A sound broke the silence, the wet, sticky sound of something shifting its weight. It was moving, coming for me. My fingers found the switch on my backup light, and I flicked it on. It was, right in front of me. It was wearing Alistair Blackwood's face, or a horrifying parody of it. The skin was stretched too tight over a skull that was subtly wrong. The eyes were pits of absolute darkness, and the mouth was open in a silent scream, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. It raised a long, spindly, arm, its fingers ending in black, sharpened claws. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a choked, pathetic gasp. I scrambled backwards, falling over something on the floor. My hand landed in something wet and sticky. I didn't want to know what it was. I crab-walked away, my light fixed on the abomination as it glided towards me, its movements unnatural and jerky, like a marionette with its strings cut. It wasn't walking. It was floating an inch above the floor. It opened its mouth, and a sound came out. Not the whispers. A voice. Alistair's voice, but twisted, layered with a dozen other agonized tones. "You are not the master," it rasped, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "You are the fuel, just as he was. You brought your little light into my house. Now you will help me leave." The back of my legs hit the stone staircase. There was nowhere else to go. The creature was 10 feet away. 5. Its cold aura washed over me, a soul-deep chill that felt like death itself. In that last, desperate moment, my panicked eyes darted around the room and landed on a small satchel of what looked like salt, spilled near the altar, part of Alistair's failed ritual. An old ghost story, a piece of folklore flashed in my mind. I lunged for it. My fingers closed around a handful of the coarse grains just as the creature's claws raked across my back. The pain was searing, white-hot. I screamed, a raw animal sound, and threw the salt with all my might. It struck the creature square in the chest. It recoiled as if I had thrown acid on it. A shriek tore through the chamber, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that was not human, not animal, not of this earth. The face of Alistair Blackwood melted and contorted, the formless, pure shadow underneath writhing and boiling. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I scrambled up the stairs, clawing my way back into the library. I didn't stop. I ran through. The dark, cavernous halls of Blackwood Manor, the creature's unholy shriek echoing behind me. I didn't care about my equipment, my investigation, my channel. All I cared about was escape. I threw myself through the broken window, not caring about the glass that sliced at my arms and face. I hit the overgrown lawn, rolled, and pushed myself to my feet, and I ran. I ran through the woods, branches whipping at my face until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I didn't stop running until the twisted silhouette of Blackwood Manor was swallowed by the trees and the dawn was breaking on the horizon. I never went back for the rest of my gear. I left it all in there. I drove for 12 straight hours until I ran out of gas. I've been staying in this place for a month now. I haven't really been outside. The police, they didn't believe me, of course. They said it was probably a squatter or an animal. The scratches on my back. I must have done that on the window. They told me to stay away from the property, like I needed to be told. I have all the footage from my head cam. I've watched it. I've watched it 100 times. You can see everything. The rocking horse, the journal. You can hear the whispers. And in the sanctum, in that last second before the light went out, if you pause it, you can see it. You can see its face. I'm posting this as a warning. Don't go to Blackwood Manor. Don't go looking for these things. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some shadows are meant to be left alone. People in the comments say I'm brave, that I'm a hero. I'm not. I'm a fool who walked into a tomb and managed to crawl back out. But the thing is, sometimes I wonder if I really got out at all. The doctors say it's PTSD, trauma. But at night, when I turn off all the lights, I still feel that cold. And sometimes, I hear whispering, right here, in this room, and it sounds like my own voice. Mine.